The baby's cry filled the farmhouse as dawn came up gray over the Halverson fields, and Martha Keene pressed the last of the linens into her bag. She had been on her feet since midnight. The mother had gone pale before the worst of it was over, and the cord had caught wrong, and there had been a stretch near 4 in the morning when Martha had not been certain either of them would see the sun. Both had lived. That was what she carried home from a night like this. Not thanks, not rest, just 2 more heartbeats in the county that had not stopped. The family was already turning inward around the new one by the time she reached the door. The mother's own mother crooning over the bundle, the father hovering with his hat still on, forgetting himself. Martha's bag latch stuck when she tried to close it. It had been sticking 2 years now. She pressed it twice before it caught. She was nearly out the door when the father spoke to his own mother, low, not meaning it unkindly, not meaning her to hear it at all. "Does she have anyone at home?" Martha did not turn around. She had been asked harder things in worse rooms and had learned there was no profit in answering a question nobody had actually put to her. She took the bread they pressed into her hands and the coins wrapped in a handkerchief, and she walked the 2 miles back toward town with the sun coming up pink behind her, and she let the question ride along beside her the way a stone rides in a boot, not stopping her just there with every step. She passed 3 farmhouses on the road home. Every one of them had a lamp still burning in a window for someone. Her own room, when she finally reached it, would be dark, same as it always was, because there was no one in it to leave a light burning for her. The store was just opening when she came into town. Calvin Becker stood on the step with a broom, and he looked up and took her in. The bag hanging low in her hand, the shoulder she was favoring, the hair coming loose from its pins. And he didn't ask how the night had gone. "Coffee's on?" She almost refused. Refusing was reflex with her, worn smooth as a doorknob from years of use. But her feet had already stopped walking, and she was too tired that morning to perform strength for one more person who didn't need the performance. "Just for a minute." She went in ahead of him, the bell over the door still swinging. The store smelled of coffee and lamp oil and flour. He poured from the pot on the little stove behind the counter and set the cup near her hand, not into it, leaving her the choosing of when to reach for it. She told him about the Halverson baby while she drank. Big, difficult, and living, because he'd hear it soon enough from someone else, and she'd rather he had it plain from her. The coffee was terrible. She didn't tell him so. Something in her chest eased down by 1 notch, the first ease it had known in 18 hours, and she sat a while longer than she'd meant to. It became a habit that neither of them put a name to. She came in through the week for cloth and willow bark and lamp oil and found things already set aside for her. A spool of the plain thread she used for stitching, a tin of the coffee she bought for other people's kitchens, and never her own. He wrote it all properly into the ledger and let her settle when the families settled with her, which was sometimes weeks off and sometimes never, and he did not once mention that second part. "You buy coffee for half this county," he told her one afternoon, sliding a tin across the counter, "and never for your own kitchen. I don't sleep enough to need it." He set the tin down anyway, not pushing it toward her, just leaving it within reach. That's an argument for buying it, not against. She let that sit without an answer, which was as close as she came, most days, to agreeing with a man. She noticed things about him, too, in the weeks that followed. That he ate, standing at the counter after closing, a cracker, a wedge of cheese, nothing warm, nothing that asked to be sat down for. That the second chair in the back room had gone under a stack of crates, as though an empty chair were harder to look at than a full one. That a teacup sat dusted but untouched on the top shelf, plainly not his, plainly left there by someone who wasn't coming back for it. She left a jar of broth on the counter one evening without a word about it. The following week, the chair had been dug out from under the crates and moved nearer the stove. He caught her looking at it once. "Somebody's fixin' to sit there. Thought I'd get it ready." "Who for?" She kept her eyes on the chair rather than on him. "Anybody with the sense to sit down when she's asked." His own coat cuff had gone to fraying threads by the following week, mended so badly it barely held. She took it off the hook without asking, and did it properly, while she waited on a delivery he was slow finding. He didn't thank her for it. He wore it the next day. Neither of them mentioned it again, though she noticed, every time after, that he reached for that coat first among the three hanging on the peg. The strap on her bag had been fraying at the buckle for longer than she cared to admit. He caught sight of it one evening, turning the bag toward the lamp, frowning at the stitching the way he'd frown at a column of figures that wouldn't balance. "This is going to fail you at the worst hour there is. It's held 20 years. That's not the same as sound." He said it without any heat in it, but he kept turning the bag over anyway. It had rained hard the following week, and she'd nearly lost a bottle of laudanum through the loose buckle, crossing the Peterson yard in the dark, catching it against her hip more by luck than design. She left the bag with him after that without being asked twice. 3 days later it came back with a clean brass latch and stitching tighter than any she'd have paid a man in town to do for her. She never once put it on her account, but the click of it after that, one motion, not the 2 shoves it used to take, sat with her longer than a bag latch had any right to. "Showing off," she told him, holding it up so the light caught the new brass. "The old one nearly dropped your pills in the mud outside Peterson's. I heard about it." She latched the bag shut, twice for good measure, just to hear it click both times. You hear a great deal for a man who sells flour. Flour talks less than the people buying it. Word came that autumn that Dr. Whitcomb was sending an assistant out from the city, a young woman, properly trained, versed in the newer methods. A crate of gleaming instruments arrived at the store for safekeeping months before she was due, and Calvin set it in the back room without comment, though Martha caught him studying the shipping label longer than the crate warranted. 2 farm wives mentioned the new methods within the same week, admiringly, as though anything not yet familiar deserved the praise on principle. Hattie Mercer, heavy with her first child, asked outright one afternoon whether the new woman would be there when her time came, and something in the asking made Martha's hands go still over the girl's belly for just a moment before she answered that she expected they'd manage it together, whoever came. Hattie had been one of the very first babies Martha ever caught alone, in a house that burned down years back, though she carried no memory of that night herself, only the family's telling of it, repeated so often it had become a kind of scripture in that household. Her hand moved over her own belly now, restless, while Martha worked. "I never thought about who brought you home after. You were there when I came into this world. I never once wondered who was there for you." Martha's hands kept moving, steady, professional, no slower than they'd move over a bad sign under her fingers. "Nobody's asked me that in 22 years. She didn't say more, and Hattie, wise enough not to press a woman with her hands on an unborn child, let it be. But the question stayed in the room a while after that, refusing to leave with the one who'd asked it. Martha carried it out the door with her, folded in with the rest of what she carried on these calls, and did not set it down for several days. The fever came through that January, taking the very young and the very old first, then working on everyone between. 3 births, crowded into the same week, as they sometimes did, as if the babies of the county had some private understanding about timing that had nothing to do with anyone's convenience. Martha went from the Kellermans to the Andersons to a fever case on the North Road and back to the Kellermans again, whose baby had turned in the night, and she did not properly sleep, not once, not more than an hour stolen sitting upright with her coat still buttoned. By the fourth day her legs felt borrowed from somebody else. She was reaching for a tin of willow bark on the high shelf in the store when the room tipped sideways in a way rooms were not meant to tip. She didn't fall. Calvin had her by the elbow before her knees finished deciding what to do about it, and he walked her unhurried into the back room and set her down in the chair by the stove. "I have to get to the Hendersons. Their girls due any moment. Lydia Prescott can go to the Hendersons." He was already sending the boy for her. He turned the sign in the front window to "closed," an hour before he'd ever closed it in 9 years of keeping that store open, and there would be talk about that by supper. There was always talk when a man's habits broke without warning. "That's not your call to make. No, it's yours. You're just not fit to make it right now, so I'm making it until you are." He folded her fingers around the cup himself when she was too tired to do it on her own. "You can't help the next house if you fall down on my floor first." It was such a plain thing to say, not tender. True, the way you'd warn a man his wagon wheel was coming loose before it came off in the road, but she pulled her hand back from his a moment after, sharp enough that he noticed. "You don't get to close my calls for me, Calvin. Not without asking." He had the grace to look at the floor rather than at her. "You're right. I should have asked first and argued second." He didn't take it back, though, and the sign stayed turned to "closed." "I'm asking now. Sit a while longer." The plainness of that undid her faster than any kindness would have. She sat very still in the chair by the stove and let herself be looked after, which for her amounted to nearly the same thing as being loved, though she would not have used the word, not that night, not for a long while yet. "I don't much know how to do this," she admitted finally, meaning the sitting, meaning the being minded, meaning something larger than either. He didn't try to answer that. He only pulled the second chair, the one that had been waiting by the stove for weeks now, a little closer to hers, and let the store stay dark around them longer than either of them had planned. The Town Relief Committee took up the matter of a stipend that March, ahead of Iris Pell's arrival, expected sometime in April. Dr. Whitcomb had asked the town to guarantee her wages before she made the move, and the committee met in the church basement to settle it. Sensible people saying sensible things about modern care and a young woman willing to make her life in the county. Someone mentioned kindly that Martha Keene had surely earned a rest by now. Someone wondered, just as kindly, whether she might help train the girl up before stepping back. Martha sat in the third pew of that first meeting and understood, with a clarity that felt like cold water down the back of her collar, that 22 years of losing sleep over other people's children had been treated by this town like weather. Something that simply happened. Something nobody thought to pay for, because it had always just been there, whether anyone was ready for it or not. The meeting reconvened the following Sunday in the church basement, folding chairs and lamplight and coffee gone bitter in a tin pot. Calvin stood partway through, which turned heads because he was not a man who spoke up in meetings. He brought the store ledger with him and set it open on the table at the front. He read the figures like he'd read out a grocery order, plain, unhurried, no flourish in it. Cloth sold at cost, or under it, to families who couldn't pay full price after a hard birth. Medicine bottles bought more than once with Martha's own coin. lamp oil charged against accounts she had never once pressed a family to settle. He did not make a speech of it. He simply read the numbers and let the room do its own arithmetic. This town has been paying Martha Keene in gratitude for 20 years. He closed the book. Gratitude does not buy lamp oil. The room went quiet, in the particular way a room goes quiet when something true has landed that nobody else had thought to say first. A woman near the front murmured that they had always been grateful, as if the word itself might settle the account. Martha stood before the quiet could turn into pity, which she wanted less than she wanted almost anything. "I'll train Miss Pell, gladly. She's got good hands and a kind manner, and this town could do far worse." She let that sit a moment before going on. "But I'll be paid going forward the same as she's paid, and I'll see some settlement of what's owed in whatever form the town can manage. Not as charity." She looked around the room, not at Calvin, meeting each face in turn. "If the work mattered enough to send for at 2 a.m, it matters enough to count. Write it down, the way you'd write down anything else you meant to keep." Nobody had an answer for that because there wasn't one that sounded well out loud. The committee voted the stipend before the meeting closed, for both women, and nobody made a speech about it afterward. It simply got written down, the kind of thing that only gets written down once somebody troubles to make it visible. Calvin hadn't stepped in front of her to finish it. He'd stood a little to the side, where the room could see plainly that whatever this was between them, it left her the one doing her own claiming. Iris Pell arrived the second week of April, as promised, with a case of gleaming instruments and a manner that was, by every fair account, kind. She was good with the families, careful. There was nothing in her that invited resentment, and the town settled into the new arrangement faster than anyone had expected. He didn't ask Martha that night, or the next. It was near 2 weeks after Iris had settled in. An evening when the younger woman took a call alone for the first time. Straightforward. Nothing that needed two of them. And Martha found herself standing outside the store with an evening that belonged, for once, to no one but her. The lamp was already burning in the window when she went in. The coffee was already on. She tasted it. Still terrible. "I've had time to practice." He didn't sit down across from her, as he usually did. He stood, turning his hat once in his hands, then set it on the counter and seemed unsure, for a moment, what to do with hands that had nowhere left to go. "I didn't speak up at that meeting to bind you to anything. Wanted that plain before I say the rest." He fumbled the second part longer than he meant to, starting once toward the back room and stopping himself. "The back room's had 2 chairs in it a good while. I'm tired of pretending the second one's for customers." He nodded toward it, toward the lamp, toward the pot still warm on the stove, as if the room could finish the sentence better than he could. "I'd like to be the one who waits up, if you'll have me." She didn't answer him right off. She set her medical bag down on the floor by the stove instead of keeping it in her hand ready for the door. She crossed to the wall and hung her shawl on the peg beside his coat, and picked up the cup he'd poured and held it a moment before she drank. "Yours is the first light that was ever burning for me, instead of for somebody else's child." She set the cup down, deliberate, both hands free now. "It's a yes, Calvin Becker. Don't make me say it twice. I've been up since 4. He crossed the room and took her hand, and they sat down together in the 2 chairs by the stove, letting the lamp burn past closing for the second time in 9 years. The wedding was small, in late spring, held in the church where the committee had once discussed her like weather. Hattie came with her new baby on her hip and cried through the whole of it, and blamed the child for it afterward, and nobody believed her. Iris took the ordinary calls that summer and did well by them, bringing the hard cases to Martha with a respect that had nothing performed in it. The ledger, over the months that followed, began to balance. Some families settled in coin, some in eggs, wood, mending, or work done before winter. The old teacup came down off its high shelf that autumn and went back into use, set alongside a second one chosen because Martha liked the weight of its handle in her palm. The second chair never went back under the crates. Calvin took to sitting in it most evenings now instead of standing at the counter, and the stove stayed built up past dark instead of banked low the way he'd kept it those 9 lonely years. And if either of them noticed how much warmer the back room had become, neither said so out loud. It was enough that it was true. Late one November night, a boy came running through the frost, breath tearing white ahead of him, pounding at the store door because the miller's girl was coming early, and there wasn't time to send for anyone farther off. Martha was already reaching for her coat when she heard the bag's latch click clean across the room. Calvin had it in his hand before she'd crossed the floor. Coffee'll be waiting. Bad and hot. Same as ever. She took the bag from his outstretched hand. See that it's hotter than last time. I make no promises I can't keep. There had been a winter once, years back, when she'd walked home from calls like this one counting which window still had a lamp burning for somebody, and none of them had ever been hers. She didn't say it now. She didn't need to. She went out into the cold with the bag in her hand, the latch catching clean behind her. Behind her, Calvin's lamp stayed burning in the store window, and a second cup waited on the table for whenever the night was done. She walked toward the sound of a family that needed her, same as half the county still did. And somewhere behind her, for the first time in 22 years, a light stayed lit that was hers to come home to.